Arthur Vance, a titan of industry, walked into his silent kitchen. He heard his daughter Lily murmur, "I can't eat this anymore." What he saw next made his world crumble forever. The grand entryway of the Vance estate usually hummed with a quiet efficiency, a testament to Arthur's meticulously ordered life. But tonight an unsettling stillness hung in the air, a silence that felt less like peace and more like an absence. He had returned a day earlier than expected from a crucial business trip, a rare deviation from his carefully planned schedule, driven by an inexplicable unease that had gnawed at him for days. The mansion, vast and opulent, swallowed the sound of his footsteps as he moved through the marble-floored foyer, echoes of his own presence feeling strangely foreign in a home that often felt more like a monument to his achievements than a sanctuary. A faint, almost imperceptible whimper, thin and fragile, reached his ears from the direction of the kitchen, pulling him forward with an urgency he hadn't felt in years, a prickle of alarm tightening his chest as he approached the swinging door. He paused, his hand hovering over the cold metal, a sudden premonition chilling him to the bone. Peeking through the narrow gap where the door didn't quite meet its frame, his breath hitched in his throat, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. 6-year-old Lily sat hunched at the large kitchen island, her small frame dwarfed by the polished granite, a bowl of what looked like a thick gray gruel before her. Her usually bright eyes were downcast, her shoulders trembling with silent sobs, and the faint, almost unheard murmur that had drawn him here escaped her lips again, her small voice barely audible as she whispered to Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, that she could not eat this anymore. Mrs. Gable, her back to Arthur, turned slightly, a chillingly saccharine smile playing on her lips, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. As she leaned closer to Lily, insisting in a low, controlled tone that she would indeed eat it, her hand gripping a spoon with an almost imperceptible tremor of impatience. It was then that Arthur noticed the telltale hint of purplish bruising peeking from beneath the sleeve of Lily's pristine white blouse, a stark, violent contrast against her pale skin, and a wave of ice-cold dread washed over him, solidifying into a fierce, protective rage. He pushed the door open, the sudden creak of the hinges echoing loudly in the sudden stunned silence, his voice a thunderclap, demanding to know what exactly was going on in his kitchen. Arthur Vance had built his tech empire with the same relentless focus that now kept him afloat in a sea of unspoken grief, a grief that had settled deep within him like a permanent frost after the departure of his beloved wife, Eleanor, during the birth of their second child, Leo. The loss had been a chasm, swallowing not just his joy but a part of his very soul, leaving him emotionally barren, a hollow echo in the opulent halls of his own making. He had poured himself into his work, each new innovation, each successful venture, a desperate attempt to fill the gaping void, to outrun the crushing silence that had replaced Eleanor's vibrant laughter. His children, Lily, a bright and sensitive girl of 6, and infant Leo, were precious fragments of his lost love, yet he had become a distant figure in their lives, a provider of comfort and luxury, but an absentee father in the truest sense, leaving the delicate intricacies of their upbringing largely to the care of others. Mrs. Gable, with her crisp uniform and seemingly boundless energy, had stepped into that void seamlessly, presenting herself as the epitome of maternal affection and domestic devotion. Her references had been impeccable, her demeanor outwardly warm and reassuring, and Arthur, blinded by his own sorrow and the crushing demands of his business, had seen in her a solution, a reliable presence for his children when he could not be. He had trusted her implicitly, grateful for her apparent dedication, for the way she seemed to manage everything with quiet competence. Yet beneath that polished veneer, a cruel resentment simmered, fueled by a calculating greed that saw Arthur's emotional absence not as a tragedy, but as a perfect, exploitable opportunity. She moved through the house with a quiet authority, her eyes constantly assessing, calculating, her seemingly gentle touch hiding a sharp edge that only the children truly experienced. Now, standing in his own kitchen, the horrifying tableau before him began to unravel, the carefully constructed facade of Mrs. Gable's benevolence, the way Lily flinched, the subtle rigidity in Mrs. Gable's posture, the sickly sweet scent of the gruel, all coalesced into a chilling picture of something deeply, fundamentally wrong. Arthur's mind raced, a torrent of guilt and self-recrimination washing over him. He thought of the times Lily had been unusually quiet, the fleeting moments he dismissed as childish tantrums, the vague complaints about her tummy aches, the way she sometimes seemed to shrink from Mrs. Gable's touch, moments he had been too preoccupied, too emotionally distant to truly see. The bruises, so small yet so profound, screamed a truth he had been too blind, too absent to acknowledge. The once comforting silence of his home now felt like a shroud, a silent accomplice to the unfolding cruelty. A fierce, primal instinct long dormant ignited within him, a burning resolve to protect his children, to uncover the depths of this betrayal, and to make amends for his own unwitting complicity. This was not just a domestic dispute. This was a battle for his children's very souls, and he, Arthur Vance, was finally ready to fight. Mrs. Gable spun around, her face a mask of practiced surprise, her hands fluttering to her chest as if genuinely startled, the spoon clattering softly onto the polished granite countertop. "Oh, Mr. Vance," she exclaimed, her voice laced with an artificial sweetness that grated on Arthur's raw nerves. "You're home early. What a pleasant surprise." She quickly moved to block Lily from Arthur's view, her body a shield, her smile unwavering, but her eyes, Arthur noticed, held a flicker of something cold and calculating, a brief moment of panic quickly masked by her customary composure. Lily, meanwhile, shrank further into herself, her small hand instinctively reaching for the bruise on her arm. Her gaze fixed on the floor, a silent testament to a fear that was far too profound for a child her age. Arthur's eyes, however, remained fixed on the purplish mark, a silent accusation that pierced through Mrs. Gable's thin veneer of innocence, and a deep guttural growl rumbled in his chest, a sound he hadn't known he was capable of producing. He took a step forward, his imposing presence filling the spacious kitchen, and Mrs. Gable, for the first time, seemed to falter, her carefully constructed composure cracking just a fraction. He looked at her, then at Lily, his voice low and dangerous, a stark contrast to his usual reserved tone, demanding to know what was happening to his daughter, and why she was being forced to eat something that clearly distressed her. His gaze lingering pointedly on the faint bruise. Mrs. Gable quickly recovered, her voice now tinged with a feigned concern, explaining that Lily was simply being a bit fussy, a common occurrence with children and new foods, suggesting the bruise was merely from a playful tumble earlier in the day. "A small accident that was entirely innocent, nothing to worry your head about, Mr. Vance." Her words, however, felt hollow, devoid of genuine warmth, and Arthur could almost taste the lie in the air, a bitter metallic tongue that sharpened his resolve. He gently but firmly moved Mrs. Gable aside, kneeling down to Lily's level, his heart aching at the sight of her tear-streaked face, her small body trembling with a fear that went beyond a mere dislike of food. Lily, his precious girl, looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes, her lips quivering, and she murmured, her voice barely a whisper, that Mrs. Gable made her eat it every night, and that sometimes when she didn't, Mrs. Gable would make her stay in her room, and that it hurt sometimes, her small fingers once again touching the discolored skin on her arm. The words, so simple yet so devastating, struck Arthur like a physical blow, each syllable a hammer against his carefully constructed wall of denial, shattering his world into a million jagged pieces. The image of his wife Eleanor, her radiant smile, her gentle touch flashed before him, a painful reminder of the love and protection he had failed to provide in her absence. He felt a profound, suffocating wave of guilt wash over him, a crushing realization of how deeply he had neglected his children, how utterly blind he had been to the silent suffering happening right under his own roof, in the very heart of his home. He pulled Lily into a tight embrace, burying his face in her soft hair, inhaling the innocent scent of her, vowing silently, fiercely, that this nightmare would end, and that he would move heaven and earth to protect her and her infant brother. Over the next few days, a subtle shift permeated the Vance household. Arthur, once a phantom presence, now moved through the rooms with a newfound purpose, his senses acutely tuned to every whisper, every shadow, every fleeting expression on his children's faces. He noticed the way Lily would sometimes flinch when Mrs. Gable entered a room, barely perceptible tremor that spoke volumes, and the way the baby, Leo, would often cry inconsolably only to fall silent, almost too quickly, when Mrs. Gable picked him up, a silence that felt heavy, unnatural. The housekeeper, for her part, maintained her facade of unwavering devotion, her movements around Arthur carefully choreographed, her voice perpetually soft and deferential. Yet Arthur caught glimpses of the old cruelty, a fleeting hardness in her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking, a sharp tone directed at Lily when she asked for something, quickly softened into a saccharine indulgence when Arthur's gaze landed on them. He saw the way she would sometimes usher the children into their rooms, closing the doors with a soft click that seemed to echo with an unspoken command, a subtle locking mechanism that kept them isolated, out of sight and out of mind, particularly from his view. One afternoon, Arthur, feigning a sudden work call, observed Mrs. Gable from the hidden vantage point of his study's surveillance feed, a system he had installed years ago for security but had rarely ever checked. He watched, his heart sinking with each passing moment as Mrs. Gable, believing herself unobserved, dropped her mask entirely. He saw her roughly pull a toy from Lily's hand, saw the child's small whimper quickly stifled by a sharp, whispered reprimand, saw her force-feed Leo his pureed vegetables with an alarming impatience, ignoring the baby's desperate gurgles of protest, It was a chilling performance of alternating subservience and cruelty, a masterclass in manipulation, confirming his darkest suspicions and fueling the simmering rage within him. The meticulously clean home, once a symbol of his success, now felt like a gilded cage, a prison for his innocent children, and he, the unwitting jailer, had been too lost in his own sorrow to see the bars. He began his investigation with a quiet, methodical intensity, moving through his own house like a detective, searching for clues, for any scrap of evidence that could expose Mrs. Gable's duplicity. He remembered a conversation with Eleanor years ago, when she had spoken of a hidden compartment in her old writing desk, a place where she kept her most private thoughts, her hopes and fears, a small, intricate box that only she knew how to open. It was a desperate hope, a fragile thread connecting him to the woman who had always seen the truth, who had always known how to navigate the complexities of life with a clear heart. He knew that if anyone could offer a posthumous guiding hand, it would be Eleanor, and the thought of her, her unwavering love, became a beacon in his darkening world, a silent promise that he would not fail his children again. He needed to find that desk, to unlock its secrets, and to uncover the truth that lay hidden beneath years of neglect and manipulation, a truth that he now realized was essential not just for his children's safety, but for the very redemption of his own fractured soul. Arthur, consumed by a quiet desperation, began his meticulous search for Eleanor's writing desk, a piece of furniture he vaguely remembered from their early years in the mansion, before the sprawling estate had become a monument to his solitude. He moved through the house with a ghost-like presence, his footsteps soft on the plush carpets, his mind sifting through memories, trying to pinpoint its location. He recalled Eleanor's fondness for quiet corners, for spaces bathed in natural light where she could indulge in her love for literature and correspondence. The library, vast and filled with the scent of old paper and leather, was his first stop, but it yielded nothing. He moved to the sunroom, a vibrant space usually overflowing with exotic plants, her touch still evident in the careful arrangement of orchids, but the desk was absent. The search became a pilgrimage, each room a portal to a forgotten memory, a painful reminder of the life they had built and the vibrant soul he had lost. He touched forgotten trinkets, gazed at framed photographs of Eleanor, her eyes sparkling with an inner light that now seemed to mock his current despair, each glance a fresh stab of regret for his emotional distance. Finally, in a rarely used guest bedroom on the second floor, tucked away in a sunlit alcove overlooking the sprawling gardens, he found it. It was a delicate piece, crafted from dark cherry wood, its surface bearing the faint, almost invisible marks of Eleanor's pen, a testament to countless hours spent in quiet contemplation. His fingers traced the intricate carvings, a wave of profound sorrow and tender affection washing over him, a potent mix of what was and what could have been. He remembered Eleanor speaking of a hidden compartment, a secret place for her most cherished thoughts, a sanctuary for truths too delicate for the open world. Arthur ran his hands over every inch of the desk, searching for the subtle mechanism, the hidden latch, the secret spring that would reveal its contents. It took him hours, his frustration mounting with each failed attempt, until, almost by accident, his thumb brushed against a small ornate carving on the underside of a drawer pull, and with a soft click, a narrow panel slid open, revealing a shallow, velvet-lined recess. Inside, nestled amongst dried lavender and a few pressed flowers, lay a stack of delicate, cream-colored envelopes, tied with a faded silk ribbon. His heart pounded with a mixture of dread and anticipation as he carefully untied the ribbon, the paper soft and fragile beneath his touch. The top envelope contained a single, folded letter written in Eleanor's elegant script, addressed simply to him. His hands trembled as he unfolded the aged parchment, the words blurring for a moment through a veil of unshed tears. It was a letter penned shortly after Leo's birth, a testament to her hopes and fears, her overflowing love for their children, and a subtle, almost imperceptible note of unease regarding Mrs. Gable. Eleanor wrote of Mrs. Gable's efficiency, her seemingly perfect care, but also of a strange coldness she sometimes perceived in her eyes, a possessiveness that felt unsettling, particularly when she interacted with Lily. She mentioned a fleeting incident where Lily, then barely a toddler, had cried inconsolably after being alone with Mrs. Gable, an incident Eleanor had dismissed at the time as a childish whim, but had nonetheless recorded in her private thoughts, a seed of doubt planted in her loving heart. Eleanor's words, now imbued with a chilling prescience, resonated deeply within Arthur, echoing the very suspicions that had begun to plague him. She had urged him in her gentle yet firm way to always be present, to truly see their children, to trust his instincts as a father, for a mother's intuition, she had written, was a powerful, unwavering force, and a father's love, equally so. Her words were a balm and a condemnation, a painful reminder of his past failures. yet also a powerful call to action, a posthumous plea from the woman he loved. The letter also contained a small leather-bound journal, its pages filled with observations about the children's routines, their milestones but also subtly interwoven. Were more notes about Mrs. Gable, detailing instances of unexplained absences of small trinkets, vague reports from other staff members about Mrs. Gable's occasional harshness, and a growing concern about her financial habits, particularly her penchant for expensive purchases that seemed far beyond her housekeeper's salary. Eleanor, with her keen eye and compassionate heart, had begun to piece together a puzzle that Arthur in his grief had been too blind to acknowledge. The revelations from Eleanor's desk galvanized Arthur, transforming his passive grief into an active, burning resolve. He spent hours poring over the journal, cross-referencing dates and incidents, the meticulous details painting an increasingly disturbing picture of Mrs. Gable's true nature. He started to notice patterns, the way certain household items would subtly vanish, only to reappear weeks later or not at all. He recalled the unexpected bills for expensive repairs to the children's rooms, always explained by Mrs. Gable as unavoidable accidents, now seeming suspiciously like opportunities for her to channel funds. His mind, once clouded by sorrow, now functioned with the precision of a seasoned investigator, each new piece of information a vital clue in the intricate web of deceit. He began to keep his own journal, meticulously documenting Mrs. Gable's behavior, the children's reactions, and the subtle, unsettling shifts in the household, creating a comprehensive timeline that would stand as undeniable proof. His attention to Lily and Leo intensified, a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm of his absence. He started spending every possible moment with them, reading to Lily before bed, his voice a comforting balm in the quiet evenings, and gently rocking Leo to sleep, savoring the warmth of his small body against his chest. He observed Lily's tentative smiles, the way she would sometimes lean into his touch, her fears slowly, cautiously, giving way to a nascent trust. He made sure to be present during mealtimes, sitting with Lily, encouraging her, gently coaxing her to eat, ensuring that Mrs. Gable's presence was always mitigated by his own. Mrs. Gable, sensing the shift in Arthur's demeanor, became even more overtly solicitous. Her smiles wider, her voice sweeter, her movements more theatrical in her feigned devotion, but Arthur saw through it all. His eyes now unclouded, his heart hardened by Eleanor's posthumous warning and the undeniable evidence of his children's suffering. So the battle lines were drawn, and Arthur Vance, the emotionally distant Titan, was now a father, fierce and unwavering, ready to protect his family at all costs. Arthur's meticulous investigation extended beyond the hidden journal. Delving into the financial labyrinth of his own household, he requested detailed statements from his personal accounts, the children's trust funds, and the household's operating budget, a task he usually delegated without a second thought. What he uncovered sent a cold dread through him, a confirmation of Eleanor's subtle warnings and his own burgeoning suspicions. There were inflated invoices for services never rendered, exorbitant charges for supplies that never materialized, and a series of unusual wire transfers to an offshore account disguised as payments to various obscure vendors. Each transaction painstakingly cross-referenced with Mrs. Gable's work schedule and her own financial records, which he discreetly accessed, painted a damning picture of systematic embezzlement, a calculated pilfering of his family's resources, brazenly executed under the guise of household management. The sheer audacity of her deceit, the way she had woven her greed into the very fabric of his family's financial well-being, was a revelation that sickened him to his core, a betrayal far deeper than mere theft. He also discovered that Mrs. Gable had been subtly manipulating the terms of the children's inheritance, a trust fund Eleanor had established for Lily and Leo, attempting to insert clauses that would grant her temporary guardianship or significant financial control in the event of Arthur's prolonged absence or incapacity. These attempts, thankfully thwarted by the diligent oversight of Arthur's legal team, who had flagged the unusual requests as suspicious, had been dismissed at the time as overzealousness on Mrs. Gable's part, a desire to ensure the children's well-being. Now, in the harsh light of truth, they appeared as clear, predatory maneuvers, a chilling glimpse into the depth of her avarice and her desire to seize control of not just their money, but their very lives. The emotional emptiness that had once defined Arthur's life was now being filled with a fierce, burning indignation, a righteous anger that fueled his every action, solidifying his resolve to bring Mrs. Gable's reign of terror to an unequivocal end. As Arthur's scrutiny grew more pronounced, Mrs. Gable's carefully constructed facade began to fray, the edges of her composure becoming noticeably thinner. She sensed the shift in the air, the subtle change in Arthur's gaze, the way his questions, though still polite, carried an underlying current of unwavering inquiry. Her saccharine smiles became more forced, her movements around the children more overtly demonstrative of affection, almost theatrical in their exaggerated tenderness, especially when Arthur was present. She would coo at Leo, her voice dripping with an artificial sweetness, or stroke Lily's hair with a hand that had once delivered sharp reprimands, always ensuring Arthur was watching, always performing for his benefit, yet in the fleeting moments when she believed herself unobserved, the mask would slip, revealing a flicker of venomous resentment in her eyes, a tight-lipped grimace that spoke volumes of her growing frustration and fear, a fear that Arthur was beginning to truly see her for what she was. One evening Arthur, feigning sleep in his study, watched through the hidden cameras as Mrs. Gable, believing the house to be quiet and everyone asleep, crept into his office. Her movements were furtive, her eyes darting around the room, a desperate search for something, anything that could compromise his investigation or protect her own secrets. He watched as she rifled through his desk drawers, her hands trembling slightly, her face a mask of anxious determination, her greed overriding any sense of caution. She found nothing, of course, as Arthur had long since secured all incriminating evidence in a safe, undisclosed location. Her frustration was palpable even through the grainy footage, a silent scream of thwarted ambition that solidified Arthur's understanding of her true character, revealing the depth of her manipulative nature and her willingness to cross any boundary for personal gain. This nocturnal surveillance, a painful invasion of his own privacy, provided the final, undeniable proof he needed to confront her, not just with suspicion but with irrefutable facts. The bond between Arthur and his children deepened exponentially during this period of quiet investigation and intensified protection. Lily, once withdrawn and hesitant, began to blossom under her father's unwavering attention. Her laughter, once a rare and fragile sound, now echoed through the house more frequently, a melody of healing and newfound joy. She would cling to Arthur's hand during their walks in the garden, sharing whispered secrets about her day, her small face alight with a confidence that had been tragically absent for too long. Arthur, in turn, found himself rediscovering the simple joys of fatherhood, moments of pure, unadulterated love that slowly, painstakingly, to mend the gaping wound left by Eleanor's departure. He would spend hours reading to Lily, their heads bent together over storybooks, his voice a steady, comforting presence that chased away the lingering shadows of fear. Leo, too, thrived under his father's renewed presence, his baby gurgles and bright smiles a constant reminder of the precious life he had almost allowed to be overshadowed by his own grief and Mrs. Gable's cruelty. The mansion, once a cold monument to his solitude, was slowly, tentatively, transforming into a true home, filled with the warmth of genuine affection and the promise of a future built on truth and unconditional love. A sanctuary where the children's innocent hearts could finally begin to heal. With the collected evidence secured and the truth laid bare, Arthur's path became undeniably clear, though heavy with the weight of responsibility and a profound sense of urgency. He spent long nights in his study poring over the journal entries, the financial reports, and the chilling surveillance footage, each piece of evidence a stark testament to Mrs. Gable's calculated cruelty and greed. He meticulously organized everything, creating a timeline of abuse, a ledger of stolen funds, and a collection of photos of Lily's fading bruises, captured discreetly during their quiet moments together. The sheer volume of her deceit was staggering, a meticulously woven tapestry of manipulation that had almost consumed his family. He knew he could not confront her alone, nor could he allow this to remain a private matter. The safety of his children, and the justice Eleanor would have demanded, required a formal, uncompromising approach. The thought of exposing such a deeply ingrained betrayal, especially one that had festered in his own home, was daunting, but the innocent faces of Lily and Leo fueled an unwavering strength within him, a protective fire that burned away any lingering hesitation. He reached out to Robert Davies, a family lawyer known for his unwavering integrity and sharp legal mind, a man who had also been a trusted confidant of Eleanor. Arthur arranged a discreet meeting at Davies' private office, a somber space filled with the scent of old books and quiet authority. As Arthur laid out the meticulously gathered evidence, the financial statements highlighting the systematic embezzlement, Eleanor's poignant letter and journal entries detailing her early suspicions, the grainy but damning surveillance footage, and the photographs of Lily's injuries, Davies listened with a grave expression, his usually calm demeanor replaced by a look of profound concern and quiet outrage. The lawyer's initial skepticism, born from Mrs. Gable's impeccable reputation, slowly dissolved into a grim understanding as the full extent of her depravity unfolded before him. He confirmed Arthur's darkest fears, explaining the severity of the charges, not just for financial fraud but for child abuse and neglect. crimes that carried significant legal consequences and demanded immediate action. The legal process, Davies explained, would be complex and emotionally taxing, requiring Lily's testimony, however carefully handled, and a thorough investigation by Child Protective Services. The thought of his daughter, already so fragile, having to recount her trauma sent a fresh wave of pain through Arthur. But he knew it was a necessary step, a crucial part of securing her future safety and healing. Davies assured him that they would proceed with the utmost sensitivity, ensuring Lily was protected every step of the way, and emphasized the overwhelming strength of Arthur's evidence. He also advised Arthur to maintain his composure at home, to not tip off Mrs. Gable until the authorities were ready to intervene, to ensure a swift and decisive resolution that would prevent her from fleeing or further harming the children. This period of waiting, of feigning ignorance while silently preparing to dismantle Mrs. Gable's world, was excruciating for Arthur, a constant battle against his own surging anger and his desperate desire to end the charade immediately. Meanwhile, Mrs. Gable, though oblivious to the full extent of Arthur's preparations, sensed the tightening net, the subtle shift in the household's atmosphere. Her once unwavering confidence began to crack under the sustained, quiet scrutiny. Her attempts at manipulation became more transparent, more desperate. She would subtly try to isolate Lily from Arthur, suggesting extra lessons or activities that conveniently coincided with Arthur's newfound presence. Or she would attempt to plant seeds of doubt about Arthur's parenting decisions, whispering veiled criticisms about his past absences to other household staff, hoping they would reach his ears. Her saccharine smiles grew strained, her eyes darting nervously around the room whenever Arthur entered, searching for signs of his true intentions. She even made a clumsy attempt to access Arthur's study again, her movements less furtive this time, almost reckless, but she found nothing, further fueling her growing paranoia. Arthur observed these desperate maneuvers with a cold, unwavering resolve, each failed attempt by Mrs. Gable only solidifying his conviction. He saw her for what she truly was, a predator cornered, lashing out in futile attempts to maintain her control. The woman he had once blindly trusted, the figure he had allowed to stand in for a mother in his children's lives, was nothing more than a calculating opportunist, devoid of empathy and consumed by a corrosive greed. The thought sickened him, but it also hardened his resolve, transforming his initial guilt into a fierce, protective determination. He knew that the confrontation, when it came, would be explosive, a battle of truth against deceit, and he was ready. He had gathered his allies, prepared his evidence, and most importantly, reconnected with his children, their love and trust, now his most powerful weapon. The stage was set for the inevitable reckoning, a moment of profound justice that would finally bring peace to his fractured home and allow his family to begin the arduous journey of true healing. The days that followed stretched with an almost unbearable tension, a silent battle of wills playing out beneath the opulent ceilings of the Vance estate. Mrs. Gable, her nerves frayed and her desperation mounting, began to make increasingly brazen attempts to regain her former dominion. Her carefully constructed facade now riddled with cracks that Arthur observed with a cold, analytical eye. She tried to isolate Lily more frequently, concocting elaborate excuses for their absence, suggesting outings to places Arthur could not easily follow, or proposing extended playdates at a supposed friend's house, always with a subtly insistent tone that bordered on demanding. Arthur, however, countered each attempt with a calm firmness, asserting his presence, offering to join them, or simply stating that the children would remain at home. His unwavering gaze conveying a message she could no longer ignore, though she dared not openly defy him. Her smiles became brittle, her movements jerky, a desperate energy replacing her earlier, controlled grace, and she often found herself muttering under her breath when she thought no one was listening. Sharp, resentful words that hinted at a deep-seated bitterness. One particularly unsettling afternoon, Arthur found Mrs. Gable in the nursery, holding baby Leo with an uncharacteristic tightness, her back to the door. Leo was whimpering softly, his small face red, and as Arthur stepped quietly into the room, he saw Mrs. Gable's hand, momentarily clenched around the baby's arm, a fleeting grip that instantly dissolved into a gentle caress as she turned, her eyes wide with feigned surprise. "Oh, Mr. Vance," she chirped, her voice a little too high. Little Leo was just a bit restless, but he's fine now, a perfect little angel. Arthur's heart pounded with a silent fury. The image of her tight grip seared into his mind, another piece of the chilling puzzle falling into place. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable, and gently took Leo from her arms, the baby instantly quieting against his father's chest, a silent testament to the comfort he now found in Arthur's presence. The interaction, brief and seemingly innocuous to an outsider, was a stark confirmation of the constant, insidious abuse that had been unfolding. a subtle violence that left scars unseen by many but now glaringly evident to Arthur. The quiet surveillance continued, each day bringing new observations that solidified Arthur's case. He captured a moment on camera where Mrs. Gable, believing herself alone, roughly shoved Lily onto a chair after the child had accidentally spilled a drink. Her face contorted in a mask of pure anger before she quickly recomposed herself. He documented the pattern of meals, the continued forced feeding of the unappetizing gruel when he was not present, and the distinct lack of affection she showed the children when her performance was not required. The evidence was mounting, a comprehensive narrative of cruelty and neglect, meticulously compiled and ready to be presented. Robert Davies, Arthur's lawyer, had been in constant communication, preparing the necessary legal documents, coordinating with Child Protective Services, and ensuring that every step would be handled with the utmost care, particularly concerning Lily's emotional well-being. The time for action was drawing near. The final preparations, a whirlwind of hushed phone calls and urgent meetings, all conducted away from the mansion, away from Mrs. Gable's prying eyes. Arthur spent his evenings with Lily and Leo, reading stories, playing quiet games, rebuilding the shattered trust with every gentle word and every loving touch. He explained to Lily in simple, reassuring terms that sometimes adults made mistakes, and that he was going to make sure that no one would ever hurt her or Leo again, promising her that she was safe, always. Lily, her small hand clutching his, looked at him with an understanding beyond her years, a flicker of hope replacing the lingering fear in her eyes. It was a profound and emotional journey, a father's desperate attempt to mend the wounds of his absence, to reclaim his role as protector, and to instill in his children the unwavering belief that they were loved unconditionally and fiercely. He spoke of Eleanor, sharing tender memories of her laughter and her kindness, ensuring that her spirit of love and compassion remained a guiding light in their lives, a connection to the mother they had lost, but whose presence still resonated in the quiet corners of their home. The day of intervention arrived with a heavy, overcast sky, mirroring the somber anticipation in Arthur's heart. He had arranged for Lily and Leo to spend the morning with a trusted family friend, under the guise of a special outing, ensuring they would be far from the impending storm. As the hour approached, Arthur sat in his study, the meticulously organized folders of evidence spread before him, his gaze fixed on the quiet drive. He heard the subtle crunch of tires on the gravel, then the soft closing of car doors, and a moment later, Robert Davies entered, accompanied by 2 uniformed police officers and a kind-faced woman from Child Protective Services, her expression one of quiet determination. The air in the mansion, usually so still, now vibrated with a palpable tension, the silence broken only by the hushed, professional voices of the approaching authorities. It was time. The long charade was over, and the truth, armed with justice, was finally ready to confront the deceit. Arthur led the small delegation into the grand living room, a space that once symbolized his family's quiet comfort, now poised to become the stage for a dramatic reckoning. Mrs. Gable, who had been arranging a vase of lilies with an air of practiced serenity, turned at their entrance, her smile initially polite, though a flicker of unease crossed her features as her eyes registered the uniforms of the police officers and the serious demeanor of the CPS representative. "What a surprise, Mr. Vance," she chirped, her voice a little too bright, her gaze lingering on the strangers. "Is everything quite all right?" Arthur met her gaze with a steely resolve she had never witnessed, a cold fire in his eyes that stripped away her pretense. "No, Mrs. Gable," he stated, his voice calm but imbued with an undeniable authority. "Everything is not all right." Robert Davies stepped forward, his presence commanding, his voice firm but measured. "Mrs. Gable, we are here on behalf of Mr. Vance and his children regarding serious allegations of financial impropriety and, more gravely, child endangerment and abuse." Her face, usually so composed, paled dramatically, her hands instinctively clutching the vase of lilies, knuckles white. "Child endangerment," she scoffed, a forced laugh escaping her lips, her eyes darting between Arthur and the authorities, a desperate search for an escape or a sympathetic face. "This is preposterous. I have dedicated my life to these children, to this family. Arthur, you know how much I adore Lily and Leo." She turned to him, her voice laced with a manipulative plea, attempting to rekindle the old trust, the blind faith he had once placed in her. But Arthur was no longer the emotionally distant man she had so skillfully deceived. He stood tall, unwavering. "Your dedication, Mrs. Gable, has been nothing short of a carefully constructed deception," he countered, his words slicing through her facade. "We have evidence, irrefutable proof, of your systematic embezzlement of family funds, your attempts to manipulate the children's inheritance, and your cruel and neglectful treatment of Lily and Leo. The CPS representative, a woman named Miss Evans, nodded gravely, her gaze fixed on Mrs. Gable. "We have reason to believe that the children have been subjected to emotional and physical abuse under your care." Mrs. Gable's composure shattered, her face contorting into a mask of pure venom. "Lies! All of it!" she shrieked, the vase of lilies trembling precariously in her grasp. "He's just a grieving man, confused, trying to blame someone for his own failures. He was never here, always absent, burying himself in work while I did everything." One of the police officers, a stern-faced woman, calmly stepped forward. "Mrs. Gable, we have financial records, witness statements, and photographic evidence. We are also aware of unusual activity on your personal accounts that directly correlates with the missing funds from the Vance estate." The mention of photographic evidence and financial records seemed to break something within Mrs. Gable. Her eyes, once filled with a calculating glint, now blazed with an unholy fury, her carefully cultivated persona dissolving completely. She hurled the vase of lilies across the room, ceramic shattering against the marble fireplace, water and flowers scattering everywhere, a violent outburst that revealed the true depths of her rage and desperation. She pointed a trembling finger at Arthur, her voice raw and guttural. "You think you're so righteous, don't you?" she screamed, spittle flying from her lips. "You were never there. You hid behind your money and your grief, leaving me to deal with everything. Those children were a burden, just like their mother was when she left you." Arthur flinched at the cruel mention of Eleanor, a sharp pain piercing through the armor he had built, but he quickly regained his composure, his gaze unwavering. His lawyer Davies immediately intervened, instructing the officers to proceed. "Mrs. Gable, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and child abuse," the officer stated, her voice firm, as her partner moved to gently take Mrs. Gable by the arm. "No," she shrieked, struggling against their hold, her face a twisted caricature of her former self. "You can't do this. I did nothing wrong. They are my children. I raised them." She tried to pull away, her eyes wild, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch, revealing years of resentment and a twisted sense of entitlement that had festered beneath her subservient exterior. The mask had not just slipped, it had been violently ripped away, exposing a truly malevolent core. Miss Evans from Child Protective Services approached Arthur, her voice soft but reassuring. "We will ensure the children receive all the support they need, Mr. Vance. We will be in touch to discuss next steps." Arthur simply nodded, his mind reeling from Mrs. Gable's outburst, the raw ugliness of her true feelings laid bare. As the officers led us still screaming, resisting Mrs. Gable out of the house, her protests fading down the long driveway, a profound silence descended upon the mansion. The shattered vase, the scattered lilies, and the lingering scent of floral water were stark reminders of the ugliness that had just transpired. Arthur stood amidst the wreckage, a wave of exhaustion washing over him, but beneath it, a nascent sense of peace began to stir. A quiet understanding that the first, most difficult battle had been won. The house, once a prison of deceit, was finally beginning to breathe, clearing the oppressive air. He looked around the now quiet living room, picturing Lily and Leo, knowing that a new chapter, one of healing and unconditional love, was finally truly beginning for his small, resilient family. He knew the path ahead would be long, filled with challenges and emotional recovery, but for the first time in years he felt a genuine flicker of hope. 2 years unfolded, bringing with them a gentle healing, like the slow unfurling of spring after a harsh winter. The grand mansion, once a silent testament to Arthur's grief and absence, now hummed with the vibrant symphony of a family truly alive. The echoes of Mrs. Gable's cruelty had faded, replaced by the sweet sounds of Lily's laughter and Leo's joyful babbling. Arthur had transformed, shedding the heavy cloak of his past sorrow and work-driven detachment. He was no longer just a titan of industry, but a devoted father, his heart overflowing with a love he had rediscovered and nurtured with every passing day. His days were now punctuated by school runs, bedtime stories, and shared meals, each moment a treasured brick in the foundation of their rebuilt home. The garden, once meticulously maintained by staff and rarely visited by its owner, became a sanctuary for the Vance family. Arthur, his hands now accustomed to the soil, taught Lily how to plant seeds, her small fingers carefully pressing tiny hopes into the earth, just as he was doing with their lives. Leo, a sturdy toddler, would toddle around, giggling as butterflies danced through the vibrant blooms, his eyes wide with innocent wonder. Mealtimes, once fraught with tension, were now filled with easy conversation and shared smiles, Lily proudly recounting her school adventures, and Arthur listening with genuine interest, his gaze often drifting to Leo, who would enthusiastically try to feed himself, creating delightful, messy memories. The house breathed with warmth and light, a true home forged in the crucible of adversity and rebuilt with unwavering affection. Lily blossomed, her spirit resilient and bright, her bond with Arthur unbreakable, and she was a fierce, loving protector of her little brother, ensuring his world was always safe and full of kindness. Arthur often thought of Eleanor, not with the crushing weight of loss, but with a profound gratitude for the lessons she had imparted and the strength she had instilled in him through her love. He carried her memory not as a burden, but as a guiding star, illuminating the path of unconditional love and truth. The legal proceedings against Mrs. Gable had concluded, and while the details were kept from the children, justice had been served, confirming that malicious intent would ultimately face its reckoning. The family had moved forward, not forgetting the past, but learning from it, growing stronger, more connected, and more profoundly appreciative of the precious gift of one another. Their journey was a testament to the enduring power of a father's love, the resilience of young hearts, and the unwavering belief that even in the deepest shadows, truth and courage can always lead to the brightest light. What would you do to protect a child? What lengths would you go to ensure their safety and happiness? Share your thoughts and stories, and remember, the greatest battles are often fought with the quiet strength of love and an unyielding commitment to what is right. Let this story remind us that mischief will always be punished, good will be rewarded, and justice is truly built with truth, courage, and the most unconditional love.